So our guest has 786,000 subscribers plus, started posting videos in 2006, has the woodwhisperer.com where you can go and find plans and videos and lots of information, has the Wood Whisperer Guild, which is a paid site, but you get a lot out of it, a lot longer and bigger plans than you could find in the free content out there on YouTube and so forth from one of the best educators around. He has over 562,000 followers on Facebook, over 286,000 followers on Instagram, over 114 million views on the Wood Whisperer channel on YouTube. Please help me welcome Marc from the Wood Whisperer.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Marc.
How's it going?
Going well. I really appreciate you coming on tonight.
Well, thank you for being flexible with the time. A girls' gymnastics never stops. So
yes.
Got to take my daughter to gymnastics.
And family always comes first.
Absolutely.
And you'll never get an argument from me. And our audience is showing up, and I believe more will join.
Cool.
And I really appreciate it. You have been doing this since 2006 or before, as far as making videos around your content. But before that, many don't know you're actually formally trained to be a scientist, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Went to school for biology and worked in a lab for a number of years, and really didn't love it. It started out great, but then eventually I got into just management, and it just wasn't my thing. Wasn't really enjoying it. It wasn't science. It was more, managing people. So that was not too fun and exciting. So the woodworking was a lot more fun for me.
Yeah. And you got into woodworking out of necessity, right? Doing home projects, home renovation type of thing?
Yeah, I think it all started really with DIY stuff. We had a house, the only house we could afford in Southern California at the time, and had a lot wrong with it, needed to fix it. So just a lot of DIY things that eventually once those were done, I'm left with some of these tools that I purchased to get those jobs done. And it's like, well, I think I might be able to do something else with these. I was like, how about making some furniture? So that's kind of what sparked the whole thought of going into furniture making. But it did start with DIY projects.
Yeah. And you, from some of the other interviews that I saw with you in them and so forth, you went and did an apprenticeship with someone to learn the trade.
Yeah, it's sort of loosely use that word. And to me, an apprenticeship is a much more longer term sort of thing. But I was able to, a couple different times, go and spend some quality time with David Marks and learning from him. And he was definitely, well, still today is a woodworking idol of mine. It was at the time he had a TV show on HGTV and then the DIY network. And I just followed, I studied his shows like they were a manual. So that by the time I actually had a chance to work with the guy, this was before he actually started to offer classes from his shop. By the time I was there and actually in his shop, it was like I was kind of already trained up on his methods, which made it a lot easier for me to just kind of step in and be useful to him to help him get the things done that he was trying to get done. So loosely use the term apprenticeship. I studied under him for a period of time.
Well, and that's still a credit to you that you pursued the knowledge after you gained what you could alone.
Yeah.
You went and accelerated your learning curve.
Totally.
By studying with someone who's basically a master of the craft, right?
Yeah, and I begged my way to get there too. I was like, I don't know if you're into this. This may sound kind of weird, but I want to come and stay with you. I will clean your pool. I will do anything. I will mow your lawn, whatever it takes for me to hang out in your shop and just kind of absorb some knowledge from you. And he was totally cool with it. So,
Marc, what was your goal? Well, whenever you did that, did you have this vision of, I'm going to build an empire on social media and websites if I can just learn from this one person?
Well,
what was your goal by going to the apprenticeship?
Yeah, consider back in that was probably in a 2004, 2005 timeframe. A lot of what we know today in media and social media wasn't really there. So I can't remember exactly when Twitter started, maybe 2006 or 2005. So it was so early. That was not a thought in my mind at all. At that time, I just wanted to run a successful business making furniture. I partnered with David on a few different things where he had access to offcuts from a veneer factory. I don't know if it was like a place that made guitars. So they wound up with these odd cut veneer slices. So we would get these in packs, and it was like not useful to the greater industry, but to woodworkers, this was great. So between like little veneer packs that we would sell on our website, he also had access to walnut burl like bowl blanks that we would go to a big firewood pile and just kind of dig through it all day and just kind of load up a truck with this stuff, and I would drive it all the way back down to my house and sell the individual blanks. And those two things were just kind of like, the one thing David taught me early on that to this day still sticks with me is you can never really have just like one thing. If you want to succeed, you got to have a bunch of balls in the air, because at any given time, one of those can just fall away and you still have to have other sources of revenue and income. And that was the goal from the beginning, was to build a successful furniture making company, build my name up as a furniture maker, but then also have a couple other things that would, help bolster income when maybe I didn't have a job to do or I didn't have a client to work for. So I had a lot of fun just kind of getting our website built up. My wife helped me a lot with that at the time, but this is like so early on that it wasn't like you could just easily go to make a website the way that we can today. There was definitely a lot more legwork involved. And yeah, I mean, it was a lot of work, but here we are now, how many years later, this was a lot easier to do than trying to net clients constantly. And it's a bit, we'll call it a rat race, but it was difficult, very difficult to survive like that.
And whenever I think back to like business school, you want to be first in the market or one of the first, or you've got to find a way to make yourself stand out.
Yeah.
You've kind of done both. You've gone the route. You're one of the first big ones. We had Izzy Swan on here. Mm-hmm. He called you one of the forefathers of,
I think he is too, actually,
of modern day social media woodworking stars. Mm-hmm. But you have built a legacy of being one of the authority figures on the subject, because YouTube is crazy now with competition in our niche. Everybody and anybody can start a woodworking channel, and I don't discourage that. But most do it like I did, where they're going to make small projects that they can make short videos on and try to build up from that.
Oh yeah.
You started out, you were making larger projects, and you built up larger videos and everything. Making furniture is not something you can do on a 5-6 minute video.
Yeah.
And so it's really impressive what you did. And you did not have the example ahead of you of, I'm going to follow the pattern that XYZ followed, because they set up the website. They, step by step, it wasn't as well defined. YouTube and social media has changed tremendously. If you could go back in time and tell yourself to change anything, what would it be?
I might have taken YouTube seriously a little earlier. Because I started before YouTube, there were a lot of things and hoops to jump through, and it was a whole process to get that done. So I had a lot of respect for that process. When YouTube started, then it was a lot easier, because YouTube was the destination. For me, my website was the destination. So early on, from day one, YouTube was always a bit of a catch-22. Like, the eyeballs are there, the people are there, but you also get a lot of flack there, depending on what you're trying to do. So I didn't necessarily respect it as much as I should have. And this is the reason why, the fact that I'm one of the first people to do this, I'm certainly not one of the biggest in terms of numbers, right? I tend to, see the crowd going one way. My gut instinct is to almost always go the other way. I was doing long form videos before YouTube changed the algorithm to benefit longer form videos. And then once they did that, then I started doing shorter videos. It's always like they zig, I zag. And, it can be to my detriment in the terms of just pure numbers. In terms of me being happy doing what I do, which is really one of the most important things. I want to be excited about going to work and building projects every day. I've satisfied that, but that's not always going to be the thing that satisfies the numbers. So I think I probably would have taken YouTube a little more seriously. And what's interesting about this is, got to give credit where it's due. I may have been one of the earliest ones to do this, but I'll tell you, Steve Ramsey is one of the first people I think that really invented what a YouTube woodworker would be. I was a woodworker who was on YouTube. Steve was a YouTuber that did woodworking. And it's maybe a play on words, but it's a subtle difference there. And I think Steve was the one who kind of raised the bar on frequency of content. I mean, the stuff that I build, I simply cannot post as frequently as that. But Steve had a level of project and a pacing to his videos that appealed to that world. And other industries on YouTube were doing this for the longest time. They were all doing this. Like some of them were doing 2 videos a week. So he jumped into that and kind of started, I think, that trend of other woodworkers getting into this platform and somehow, as slow as woodworking can be, managing to get multiple videos out a week sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I think that would be the biggest thing is like, I do value what YouTube has to offer. I value it now. And I think I might have just started maybe paying attention to it a little bit more early on.
Yeah. We had Steve Ramsey on here and, he's such a student of YouTube. I mean,
Yeah.
he really knows YouTube. And whenever he saw that YouTube shorts were going to be a thing,
Mhm.
he made YouTube shorts and
Yep.
it paid off for him in subscribers and views and new viewers
Yep.
to his content. And yeah, he really, he knows how to play that YouTube game.
He does, and you gotta do your homework. You gotta be smart about it, and I think that's one of the problems in my position is I'm so focused. I'm still focused on my woodworking. I'm focused on trying to get better. I just want to try new things and break barriers and just be the best woodworker I can be, and then document that. I just don't really have the time or desire to really become a student of YouTube. So I'm always playing catch up. I'm always just doing the best I can to get the most out of what we're doing. But I am no student of YouTube, that's for sure.
So we talked about what you would have changed back then. You would have put more of an emphasis on YouTube. But what if you didn't start until today? What advice would you give a new YouTuber today to start?
Don't do what I did would be the first thing. Follow other people because they'll do it better than I did. I think now it's incredibly difficult. I mean, you mentioned before being early. If you're one of the first, it does impart certain advantages, and one of those is being there early gave me some momentum, gave me a little bit of credibility, and it meant that I don't have to push as hard. Even to this day, 15, almost 16 years later, I'm still able to kind of produce videos at the pace that I want to produce videos. I don't have to do what the algorithm says that I need to do. And it's, really a fortunate place to be. People who start today don't have that luxury. There's a lot more, and I don't mean this in a negative way, there's more white noise. There's just more competition for the viewer's eyeballs. And so you have to either be really good at what you do or have just a really compelling personality. The thing is, you also have to really think about what are your goals? Because now we're at that point where it's like not everyone's going to be able to make it. If making it is I want to be a full-time YouTube woodworker, it may not happen for everybody. So I think you have to really be honest with yourself about what your goal is. And if your goal is to just kind of like engage with the community, make a few videos, get a couple hundred views, have a real good time, talk with people who are really dedicated to the craft and excited about what they're doing, you could totally do that, but you got to be honest with yourself about what those ultimate goals are and then, lay the groundwork for it.
Yeah. So, and I think you're right. Expectation is a big piece of this. If your goal is to make it a hobby, then anybody can do it. If your goal is more than that, if you want to make a living at it, then you've got to either have the skills or build the skills up, and you've got to have something to set yourself apart.
Yeah. And I do think you do need to be a student of YouTube if that is part of your goal. Ignore the trends and ignore the rules at your own peril. You have to do that. And maybe at some point you build up enough momentum where you can start to just, hey, I'm going to do a passion play here. Like, this is what I love to do. I'm going to do it, even if it's detrimental to my numbers, but you need to build up that momentum to get to that point.
Now, I may be wrong, but was your first sponsor Powermatic?
No, my first sponsor was Fine Woodworking Magazine. If you could believe it. I think they gave me like $100 And I was like, cool, 6 months, right? Like it was not a lot of money. It was it was a move that was very strategic for us at the time. It was a matter of being legitimized. So in 2006, you're a internet woodworker. Guess what? The magazines don't take seriously at that time, right? Like you're just an internet guy. No one's paying attention to you. So for me, it was a matter of like, if I can find woodworking to in some way be associated with what I do, that could help legitimize our effort here. And that was the strategic move, and that actually worked in a sense. It was something. It's kind of like the empty restaurant situation, where like you see an empty restaurant, no one wants to go in and eat. As long as there's one person eating, everybody goes in. So that was also part of the theory, was get a sponsor, get a, so I can say sponsored by, make myself look sponsorable. And that's kind of, it was, it was just sort of a means to an end that then led to, I think Powermatic was the first after that point, the first serious sponsor. And then it was Festool after that.
That's awesome. And as you've dealt with sponsorships in the past, how has that climate changed over these years that you've been doing it? I mean, Powermatic has been constant with you, but how's negotiating with potential sponsors changed over the years?
It's changed dramatically. Back in 2006-ish, it was a matter of like, okay, let's go to the website, let's do a little digging, see if we could find the marketing person's phone number, and then you pick up the phone and you call. And you would think the first thing is, today it's selling them on your numbers and saying, well, look, we have this big of an audience. We can do this for you. We can do that. Back then, the first part of the conversation was, I make videos online. This is what a podcast is, or this is how you had to teach them the tech, because they didn't understand it. They knew it was kind of like something that was happening, but depending on who was heading that marketing effort at that company, they may or may not be aware, and certainly may not even be prioritizing this new up and coming media, concept. So that's the first challenge, is to make them understand what you do, and then to make them understand that it's better to pay you to get placement in that environment than to try to like make content yourself. So back then, the big buzzwords were like content marketing, basically making good stuff that people want to watch, but having brand presence in that. So it was much easier for them to hire a ding dong like me to do those videos than for them to pay 20 grand for some video house to come out and make these videos on location for them. So that was always a really challenging conversation. Then we would, let's see, a couple years later, taking things more seriously, we're talking to Powermatic and Festool. At that point, we're getting advice from people who know way more about this than us, because we don't know anything. How much do we charge? Like, where do we even begin? Because we were inventing something new that none of these companies had paid for before. So we needed help. And thankfully, we found some good resources that were able to help us put our pricing in what we felt was a fair bracket. And then we would do things like go to IWF in Atlanta or AWFS in Vegas, the big tool shows, because that's where the marketing people were at the time. And then you have a sit down and you give them your media kit and you explain what you could offer them and see if you can't make a deal. It was, I guess, a more traditional sort of setup to how this worked at the time. Well, now it's completely different. And again, the part of this is just, where I am and what my numbers are and how long we've been doing it. It's more a matter of like, I honestly turn down way more offers than I accept. I'm very picky about who we work with and what kind of ads I take and what sponsors I work with. But companies are almost desperate now to get as many influencers as possible, to get presence in front of all these different people. And it is a little bit of a gold rush. It's been a gold rush for a long time. Anybody who gets to a certain number of viewers will almost literally have tools thrown at them. And maybe not money, but you can certainly get tools because it's very low cost to the people who make them. So it is a very different environment now. Now it's more about not how can I sell myself? It's like, how far do I want to go in selling myself out? And, what are my ethics and my morals around brand presence? How much of this do I want to do? And honestly, I just keep turning the dial back. Recently, we lost Powermatic as a sponsor, and I've had offers to get other sponsors back in. And I'm just like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to do that. I'm really enjoying this period of unrestricted, not having to worry about obligations sort of, mindset. That's very healthy for me. So yeah, it's changed a lot in the last 15 years.
And Mark, so anytime you're dealing with sponsors, I would think part of that is you need to protect the reputation of the business title that you've raised up. I mean, the Wood Whisperer means a lot to a lot of people. Whenever they think about it, they know of your quality content, and dealing with one bad sponsor could be a big scar on that reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other things that you look out for to make sure that you keep down the reputational risk?
One of the things I look for is how many other people are they sponsoring? And if I see a particular company that is, and I've had these conversations with companies before, it's not that I need exclusivity, but if you are sponsoring 20 other people, excuse me, and there's all these different influencers are talking about your product, and then you come to me, I'm probably not going to be interested. It's too diluted. If I have a sponsorship message to get across, in order to give the proper value to that sponsor, I want to be one of the few people talking about it, not one of the many. So that is a warning sign to me. Now, the difference, though, is if someone's starting out and they're new, that may be their first target. Go to the companies that are sponsoring everybody. If you want to get into epoxy, go talk to Total Boat. They're sponsoring tons of people. At the very least, get some free epoxy. If you want ear protection, you're probably going to go call Isotunes, not 3M. You got to go for the low hanging fruit. But I think at a certain point, when you start getting picky and you want to be a little bit more protective of your reputation, who you associate with and how promiscuous, is that the right word to use in this context? How much they get around, I think does matter. And, but again, I think some of this is going to come down to like a personal rules and what you think is appropriate for your own brand.
I know it's got to be tempting, especially for smaller companies, smaller channels, whenever you're first getting contacted by companies to do things.
It's exciting.
But I think there are some pitfalls you need to avoid.
Well, and I think you also have a situation where it's like you're going to be offered something that you've never tested, or maybe you'll get it like one of the products and you have 10 minutes with it, but you've already agreed to do this ad. I can't criticize that. That's a personal thing for people to decide what's right for them. I know for me, if I don't believe in the product, I can't advertise it. A good example is I work a lot with woodpeckers. I love what they do, but I don't love everything that they do. So when I get an email that says, hey, we want you to run an ad on this new product we're coming out with, I'm like, okay, I need to have it. I need to see it. I need to work with it. And I can't even give you an answer until after that point, because how am I supposed to agree to do an ad on a product I can't vouch for? I don't know if it's any good. I have to try. And even if it is good, if I don't think it's good enough for my audience, if I don't think it's a good deal for my audience, I may have to turn that thing down. It just doesn't make sense for me to do it. But again, I just have a privileged position. Having been here for so long, I realize not everybody has the luxury to kind of make that decision that way. Sometimes you're just like me with fine woodworking early on. I just took it because it was a legitimization move and it made sense for me at the time.
Yeah. And to our audience, if you're enjoying this, getting anything out of it, please hit that like button. If this is your first time here, please subscribe, come back. We're going to have other great guests. So Mark, you build up we've talked about YouTube and you've built that reputation on YouTube, but you have other streams of income and other mediums that you are communicating your knowledge. So can you talk to us a little bit about your website and
Sure.
then a little bit about the Guild and what the Guild offers? I know it's a paid service and that's a turnoff for some people, but I know it's got to be a great value brand there.
Yeah, so the woodwhisperer.com has always been the launching point for everything that we do. We've got, our e-commerce store there, and that's really just the holding ground for all of our content that we produce, dating back to like the very first post that we did in 2006. So yeah, there's the woodwhisperer.com, there's the Wood Whisperer Guild. The Guild is sort of my answer to it's an online woodworking school. But having attended classes at true woodworking schools in person and having taught at them, I've learned a lot about that. And I wanted to bring as much of that as I could to an online audience, to get as much in-depth information as you can with access to your instructor except for now, instead of being in person and being shown how to do something, you have these videos that demonstrate it, and really just getting as close as we can to that experience. Because I don't know if you ever priced out a woodworking course or a project course at like a good school. Most of the time, it's going to be well over $1,000, 1,500, sometimes even more, depending on what you're building and how many days. So this is our way to be able to like travel the country, hook up with great woodworkers who are just doing amazing things, and film what they do, document it top to bottom, and then share that with other people. So yeah, it is of course a paid situation if you want one of those courses. But we actually do. We don't talk about it enough, but we have 2 or 3 free projects that get you access inside the site. Especially because, I mean, if you're putting money out, you want to see what this stuff looks like on the inside first. And that's what those free projects are there for people to do. If they want to go check it out, build a little bit of trust, then look at the menu of options. And if they want to, if they don't have to buy anything, but if they want to, it's there. And then they'll get extra perks as a member.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, Mark, you've been building up your business for all these years, right?
Mhm.
And what's next, and what's your plan for getting out of the business, or do you have a plan to pass it on to someone else eventually?
I don't plan to ever get out of it. One of my favorite things about woodworking is if you look at some of the greats, you look at David Marks, you look at James Krenhoff, Sam Malouf. These are people who I grew up as a woodworker idolizing. These are people who went into the shop until their last day. Like this, as long as they are physically able, they will be in the shop, and this is not a job to them. This is the passion, their creative outlet. It's something they love, and I still have that for woodworking, in spite of turning it into a business, in spite of having elements of my business that I don't always enjoy. I still enjoy the woodworking. Like if I had, if I had nothing to do tomorrow, I might play video games first. But then when I'm done with video games, I might go to the shop and just work on something. So I don't actually ever plan to fully retire, in a sense. And I've gotten a lot of gratification out of sharing what I do. So if I'm building something, there is just something fun about being able to document it and show it to other people. So I think if I had a version of like retirement or an exit strategy, it might involve just scaling back, still documenting what I do, sharing it when I want to, or not if I don't. But I do plan to be going in the shop, and why not take a couple of pictures or take a couple of videos? So I don't ever really plan to just stop. I do have plans and aspirations to grow the business, to do more, to bring in more personalities under the Wood Whisperer brand, and possibly increase our video production rate by having other people who also they're not just a clone of me, they're also a good woodworker in their own right with their own personality, and to be able to provide a little bit more in the way of various viewpoints on the channel. So it's not just the Mark show. It's more about, let's just focus on the craft of woodworking and have a couple good personalities delivering that information. So that's kind of something we hope to do in the near future if everything goes right.
That's you gave the correct answer. So that's good.
Good. It's well rehearsed.
You're still young. You got a lot of years to work anyway.
I got it. Yeah, in woodworking terms, yes.
So what about behind the scenes workers? You've got a business.
Mm-hmm.
How many people do you employ?
We have 3 employees now. We did have 4 not too long ago. I did have to let go of my shop assistant, but I do plan to hire someone else in that position in the future. We've got my videographer, editor, Todd, who lives in Texas. He does all of our traveling for guild projects and goes on location, just does an amazing job. I'm a little bit jealous because I send him off to places and pay for him to film other people, and they get the good treatment, and then I'm still filming myself. And I'm not very good at it. Like, just do the best I can. But maybe someday in a future version of this business, I would have Todd, move nearby so that we can actually work together in person. It's still a very small family business. My wife and my mom both work for the company. Actually, my wife she's working at the kids' school now, following her passions, but she still does work for the business. Technically, she gets a check, so there's that. She's laughing now too. My mom is, it's great. My mom is supposed to be retired, but she can't stop working, and she handles all of our shipping and receiving and We sell a lot of books and T-shirts and fun stuff like that. So she's in charge of all that, and she does a whole lot of the email sort of triage that happens every day with email coming in into the guild site or into the woodwhisperer.com. So yeah, I don't think I missed anybody. That's pretty much it. And we do have a bunch of people who do work for us, but they're not employees. So Brian Benham is a wonderful furniture maker and designer, does all of our plans. But he's not a Wood Whisperer employee. He's just kind of contracted to do that work. And John Funk is another integral person, brilliant designer. He does all of our website work, all the custom stuff that we need done behind the scenes. And he's also kind of like a business partner in a sense, or the sounding board for decisions I need to make. I will always talk to John first to get his perspective on that. And he's actually lives in Canada. So it's pretty.
I believe you're frozen. Okay.
I saw a spinny thing for a minute there. So
okay, you're back.
Okay, here we are.
Okay, so that's great. Well, let's get to, we've got some milestones and questions from the viewers. So Justin's Woodworks milestone, bought a wind plunge router. Congratulations, Justin.
Nice.
Justin is a young man who has started a woodworking business while still in school. He made this little keychain shaped South Carolina.
Cool.
Sent it to me, and we appreciate him here. We got a milestone at 4321 Woodworking. Chris over there has 600 subscribers. Chris, I'm happy for you, buddy. That is awesome.
Congratulations.
You've been working hard, and I know, I want you to know I'm happy for you. Everyman Build says, I got COVID, if that counts. Survived it with just the sniffles, but 2 miserable kids and 1 miserable wife.
Oh, man.
Okay. Were they miserable before you had COVID or? Okay. No, that's Jack. I appreciate you, Jack. I'm glad you're okay. And COVID has been different on everyone who's had it, but I'm glad you're doing good, and we'll count that as a milestone. 4321 Woodworking, Chris again says, has anyone ever apprenticed under you since you became an icon in this space?
Not an official capacity. I've taught classes still. I've had it's interesting because there are people who, well, like me, following David Marks, for instance, he put so much knowledge into his videos that I was able to feel like I was apprenticing with him and learning everything he did, so that when I actually did work with him, I fit right in because I learned all of his methods. And I like to think that's kind of what we do for some people. So there's a, I don't want to name names until we get official with some of this stuff, but one of our future guild instructors who I've sought out to bring into the guild, she's a fantastic woodworker, does amazing custom furniture. And we got to talking, and she said her first project was my cutting board that I put on YouTube. So she's young, and she's turned it around very quickly, starting with a cutting board and making furniture that blows my stuff away. But that's where she started. I'm not saying she was trained by me, but that was the beginning of it. So I mean, it's certainly possible that someone could, watch a bunch of YouTube videos and become a great woodworker and almost be a bit of an apprentice to a whole bunch of these woodworkers. But officially in person, I've had an employee here or there. I've had people help me out in the shop here or there, but never a true, apprenticeship situation, and therefore also not someone who went to that next level.
That's one of the beauties of YouTube and other media online is, you can influence thousands and thousands of people sharing your knowledge, and they will carry that knowledge on with them. Speaking of which, what advice would you give to someone who is trying to pass on their knowledge to a youngster, their children or grandchildren, in fact?
Yeah. I mean, this is something that I'm thinking about now. I've got 2 kids, 6 years old, 10 years old. And it's a little bit tricky for me to dish out advice because I haven't really succeeded at this yet myself, right? Like I would be a little disingenuous if I was telling, oh, you should do this and do that. I think the most important thing is to go at their pace. Even if you have these visions of making your kid follow in your footsteps and being a great woodworker, if they're not into it, I'm not going to push it, right? So I think, think about what the kid actually wants. Try to come up with projects that are quick wins. Sometimes it's not even really hammering something or sawing something. Sometimes it's just simply gluing a couple things together and then painting it. Like, think like a kid. So as they get older, then you could start to incorporate a little bit more of the cutting and the hammering and things like that. Think in terms of like the Home Depot weekend projects, or what is it, like the once a month they had those kits, and they don't really have the in-person stuff anymore, but you could still go there the first Saturday of every month and get one of those kits. And we do them all the time, but it's quick. It's only a few minutes, and sometimes kids, that's all they have to give with their attention span. So I think you got to know your kid, and you got to know the audience, and know whether or not they're going to stick with it. And because I found the few times I had tried it, found myself getting very frustrated because he wasn't cooperating. He wasn't doing the things I needed him to do. And then I just kind of took a step back, and I'm like, wait a minute, I got to refocus this whole thing. If he's here for 5 minutes and then runs inside because he wants to go do something else and then comes back again a half hour later, that's totally okay. That's what a kid is going to do. So I think I had to kind of just reframe my expectations for what that experience would be like, and let the kid kind of lead in a sense, and not force it.
Yeah. As you started that, I was thinking about the Home Depot kids workshop. I used to take my daughter to that, and those are great little projects. Wouldn't take you 10 to 15 minutes to complete it. Yep. And they were simple with only a couple of tools. Everything was already cut. Good example of something that could keep a child's attention long enough to get it done.
I do have to say that I'm kind of glad that they don't have them in person anymore, because there's no way as a parent you could leave there without a headache. At least, I don't know if every store does it the same way, but ours would put plywood down on buckets, which is then on concrete. And there's just a sea of kids going whap, 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 whap. And the echo, and it's just awful. And it's like, okay, hold on. Let's use physics here. Let's take this thing that we're nailing. We're going to put it on the floor where we can actually get like a good hammer hit on this nail. But I just remember that we probably went, 5 or 6 times with our kids before COVID. And it was just so noisy. So I like the community aspect. I did not like the noise.
Yeah, we did not have the buckets. We had the plastic fold out tables.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe even worse, right?
They would have like 8 hammers per table, and all the kids would be pounding on that. And I taught my daughter the same thing you did. If you put it on the floor, you can get a nice clean nail in there, and
got to put it on something dense and sturdy.
And yeah, those tables were bouncing. Your nails would all get lost on the floor.
Well, and if you think about it, it sounds like you're being picky, right? As a dad, no, let's do it here. But it's like, it's really inefficient this is the same thing with workbench building, or if you're building an assembly table that's hollow, like a torsion box assembly table. That's why it's not a great candidate as a workbench, because you get a lot of bounce off of it when it's not dense, when it's hollow, and there's no direct connection straight through the ground. So when you have a good classic workbench, you tend to want to work right over that leg. So every hit goes right down through the top, through the leg, and into the floor, and it's that same sort of thing with a kid who barely knows how to hit a hammer. They're not getting as much, power out of each one of those hits as they could if they were doing it properly. So it seems like you're being picky, but you're actually setting the kid up for success by letting them actually have the power that they really have. I wouldn't want to hammer on that. I would hammer on the floor to get as much power as possible.
Yeah, I think it was a great lesson. She got to try it on the table.
Yeah.
And then got to put it on the floor and feel the difference.
Yep.
So it was a lessons learned for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I miss those little outings. Sandy McKenzie over at McKenzie Lumber Mill says, what's your best piece of advice to grow a YouTube business?
Well, I think I may have already established that I may not be the best person to ask that question. But I would say there's never been as much information out there as far as developing a formula for how to have the best shot at making this work. There are just tons of channels, but a few of the better ones rise to the top that are just solely focused on giving you tips on how to build your audience on YouTube, how to accomplish that. Don't just limit yourself. Well, actually, I would actually say avoid. If you're looking at woodworking, I might avoid looking at what other people do. The thing is, if you look at what other people do really early, you tend to just do what they do. You follow what they do. And no one's really going to ever notice you if you're just copying someone else, even if you're doing it inadvertently. So I actually like to encourage people to look outside of woodworking. At the very early days for us, we started in podcasting and video podcasting. And one of the secrets to our success was we liked tech, so we would follow a bunch of tech channels. And they were always way ahead of us. Woodworking was always behind, but I would see what they did, and I'd go, "How can I apply that to woodworking?" Right. So I think there might be still some of that. If you haven't ever watched any game streamers or anything in the video game category, the tech category, look at those things, see what they're doing, look at the interaction with the audience, the way that they're structuring their videos. There's a lot that can be learned there. I think if you just stay within our niche, you may just wind up following what other people are doing and they're just following someone else. I think cast the net a little bit wider and get inspiration from that wider variety, and I think it'll make your channel a little bit more original, quote unquote, because obviously you're still kind of emulating what someone else is doing, but I think cast that net wider and it won't be as obvious.
Yeah. All right. Dusty Trails Workshop says, "What's on the bench?"
What is on the bench right now are 3 pieces of Macassar ebony. I am working on a little console, like a thing that will go under my mom's wall-mounted TV. It's just a little cabinet with legs. And the hardware on this, I designed it in SketchUp, did something I thought would look really cool, but the scale of this piece, and this is the danger of using these programs sometimes, is you could zoom in and make them look as big as they basically look bigger than they are. So in reality, this thing is a lot smaller. And the hardware I designed is made with wood. And I'm going to use ebony because I wanted it to be as dense and durable as possible. But I've designed hardware that I'm not 100% sure I could build. So I have some of the components. I did a little test run today with some maple, and it pretty close to working perfectly. But working with Macassar ebony is a whole different ballgame. So that's what I get to do first thing tomorrow is jump in there, take those 3 pieces of ebony and see if I can actually make these pieces of hardware and actually make it work.
All right. John over at Lincoln Street Woodwork says, "Maybe it's confirmation bias, but you seem to have upped the snark in a good way after parting ways with PM.
Mm-hmm.
Any truth to that?" Again, the videos have been great.
Well, Mark rhymes with snark for a reason. Yes, that observation I think is accurate. What I don't want people to think is that it's too much of a cause and effect. Powermatic never limited my commentary. They never limited anything that I did in my videos. I got to be honest, I don't know if they watched my videos. Like they're a big corporation and there's a lot of turnover. I don't know what's going on over there. So I don't want to ever give the impression that like, oh, he's, finally got the shackles off and he could be himself. What happened was with the shakeup with Powermatic, it reinvigorated me to do something different than what I've been doing and to just kind of go back to the kind of videos I really wanted to make, not because I was suddenly free of shackles, but because I was just kind of more inspired to go in that direction and have a little bit more fun and be snarky and creative. So it wasn't a direct cause and effect, but it was something that happened because that happened. I don't know if that's a goofy way to explain it, but it definitely was something that happened after that. I mean, when that kind of shakeup takes place, you kind of have to take stock. This is a sponsor that's been with us for many, many years, like 14 years or something like that. That's a big change for us. And how was I going to move forward? I was going to move forward with energy, with enthusiasm, and in some cases with a lot of snark if I think it's funny enough to do it, so that's kind of how that came about. But yeah, absolutely accurate observation.
Well, talking about taking direction or changing course, and it's common in business to reassess on a regular basis and adjust according to the metrics that you find, whether you are trending up or trending down. Is that something you do on a frequent basis, evaluate where you are and where you're trending as a business, or do you just wing it every video separately? We
do that as a business. I don't necessarily do that as a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is part of my business. If YouTube went away tomorrow, I would still have a business. And I think that's an important thing for people to remember. When you're just a little fish on the back of the shark and that shark makes a sharp right turn and knocks you off, you better have a plan for how to survive. So I think I would encourage people to not put all their eggs in the YouTube basket, but make that part of your strategy. What was the question? I totally lost my train of thought. I was excited about sharks, and I went off course.
No worries. I was kind of like going with the shark
Oh, it was a great analogy, but like
analogy.
now what?
So my question was, do you
Evaluate
reevaluate and change, make course corrections in the business?
Yeah, so we will do that in the sense of like we mentioned some of the things that we have before. So we've got merchandise, I have a couple of books, we've got the guild, we've got the YouTube channel. So we will, as a family and as a business, talk about our priorities and look at what's working, what's not working, and maybe, okay, like this past year, for instance, when I had an assistant, I had a little bit more manpower in the shop, and the priority became, let's see what happens for a period of time if we do weekly videos. What's going to happen to the numbers? And it was a bit of an experiment, but we had the freedom to do it because I had the bandwidth to handle that extra work. So we do occasionally play with that sort of thing. But one thing I am not doing is basically dissecting all of my numbers on YouTube, for instance. I mean, my gosh, do they give you stats, like serious stats that you can worry about and really try to like, everybody jumped off this video at 2 minutes. What did I do at that point? Like, I can't waste my time doing that. Ultimately, if you aren't willing to make the changes that the stats tell you should make, then don't look at them because they're just going to frustrate you. And that may be bad advice, but that's what works for me in my, keeping a healthy mental state. If I look at something and it's like, well, people are popping off and like leaving this video 3 minutes in, and I don't know how I could have done that any differently, then it does me no good to have that information, right? You got to be willing to act on it. And in most cases, I'm not. I want to make the videos that I find fun and interesting. And if that keeps me deeper into the niche, so be it. Not too worried about it. But I will say, in the broader sense, it's always important to look at your business and think about what's working, what's not, what can you change, what are you willing to change. And if there are things you're not willing to change, then I don't think it's worth your time to investigate the statistics around that thing.
Along with your analogy there, I used to work at a bank, and one of the things that would come up occasionally is reporting. We need reports on everything, and that's where we look at the statistics. And whenever we look at that, people would say, well, we need to know the reason that we lost money.
Yeah.
And one of those options that they would bring up would be divorce. And I'm like, what are you going to do with that information? Are you going to stop giving loans to married people because they might get divorced?
Right.
So if you're not going to use the data, then why worry about the data? And so to go along with your point there,
the data can be depressing. Even in my situation where we're a little bit insulated from it, if I look too hard and I start looking at these numbers and I don't see what I want to see, or I put a video out that I thought was fantastic and I'm really concerned. Like, the funny thing is, I mean, I know this is very different than a lot of people, but during your intro, you informed me of my subscriber counts on a lot of platforms that I could not tell you off the top of my head. I don't babysit that stuff because it'll drive you nuts sometimes. And it'll also take your eye off the prize. I guess, well, it depends on what the prize is. For me, it takes my eye off the prize and it distracts me from doing the thing I love to do, which is woodworking and telling people about it. Right. So I find it to be a huge distraction that we have so many stats and numbers available to us. It's hard not to look at them, but I just made a habit of like not getting too caught up in it.
Yeah. I like analytics, and I'm also have been guilty of analysis paralysis, where I study the stats to the point, then all of a sudden I haven't done anything. I haven't made another video. I haven't done something. And I don't think I'm alone. I don't think I'm the only one.
Sure.
Okay. So Mark, how can someone easily and quickly transition from PBS to social media? Both have a different audience. So Appalachian Heritage Woodshop is a classically trained master woodworker who has a PBS show, and is looking to expand that PBS show, but really wants to make a presence in social media. Any tips?
Ooh, well, you're talking about a business that I was never in, with the television model and the PBS model. Familiar with it, but not something I've ever had to conquer myself. It's a very different thing. PBS is like a one to many sort of thing, right? But social media has the added element of interaction, and getting feedback and seeing that feedback immediately. Where it's probably you're a little more insulated from that if you're in a PBS model. But that transition is, frankly, I mean, look around. Look at other companies that may already have a TV presence and what they're doing on social media. I don't know the full story there. So is it a full transition where there is no more PBS show? Or is this concurrently while the PBS show is running, you want this to be a supplementary social media account? Maybe look at what This Old House is doing. They have a pretty lively online presence, in both social media. And then, of course, Roku is a big thing for them right now. And then, of course, PBS. So there are going to be models out there to look at what they're doing and strategize that way. But if you're just looking to do a complete changeover and you're not really involved in the PBS thing anymore, then it's game on, right? Because it's a matter of like, who do you want to be on social media? Social media, you can be anything you want. Sometimes the sad truth of it is that the people who rise to the top are always not the people doing the best work. They're doing the things that get the most eyeballs and get the most attention, but that may not be the people who are doing the most, like the coolest things or the most challenging things. So social media is a huge challenge. And to this day, I struggle with what I want to present in that medium. And then when I'm happy with what I'm doing, then the platform changes the rules, right? This is the whole shark and the feeder fish concept. The platform changes the rules, and suddenly Instagram is all about short form video, vertical videos. And they used to be a great platform for publishing pictures of your work, and now it's not. But you got to be like, if your goal is to be good at the social media, you can't ignore that. It's just kind of like the YouTube rules too. You want to excel there, you have to pay attention to it. If you don't, you may not go very far.
Yeah, and he did comment that he's looking to do it concurrently.
Yeah, I would look at some of the companies and the shows that are doing this successfully are modeling exactly what you would want to do, at least at a starting point. It's always great to go your own way, but that may be a starting point to see what works for them, and then pick and choose, cherry pick what looks fun for you, and go that route.
Dusty Trails Workshop says, when you look for inspiration on a new build, where do you gravitate first?
Up there, books. I have a lot of books on woodworking. I've got a lot of old Taunton Press publications. I've got some of the fine woodworking furniture books. They would have these yearly, I think they were yearly, but they were furniture collections, basically a gallery of just amazing projects. And that's one of the first places I go. It's very tempting to just type something into Google and click images and then look at all the things that are made there. But you really have to search hard, because a lot of what you're going to get are the more busier, successful websites, the Pinterests, the Etsy, but that's only going to take you so far. I think the thing is, what people have to remember is that woodworking is not new. It did not start in 2006 when YouTube came around. There's so much amazing woodworking that is going to be lost to history because it's stuck there. It's in those books. So that's usually the first place I go. And the good thing about that is, a lot of times if I find inspiration there, it's an idea or a element to a piece of furniture that hasn't found its way online yet. Because, sadly, a lot of the people who were, doing stuff in the 70s in some of those books, maybe they're not even around anymore, and they probably didn't make the transition online. So some of their stuff, like, that's where it's locked down. So for me, that's the first place I go. Second place I go would be a Google search and trying to, sort through all the stuff that's going to throw at you. And then from that point, I might then go to YouTube and do a search, strategic search for something to get a particular idea hashed out.
Yeah, Google search almost gives you too much information.
Yeah, it's a flood.
R.H. Harley guy says, have you always been an independent entrepreneur, or did you have a full-time job career? What advice would you give to someone wanting to make the jump to build full-time?
Well, I definitely was a, career man. I went to school for science, got a job in science, and got my measly paycheck and was, happy at the time for a while, until I wasn't. So I can only tell you what worked for us. When I made that transition, it was before children, so the risk factor was low. We were young, and my wife had a pretty decent paying job. There was a little bit of security. Now we wouldn't be able to go forever on just one income, but there was enough, I guess, there for her to be confident enough to say, "You need to try this other thing." So what I did before I finally made that switch was I took the opportunity nights and weekends to build for family and friends. These are test clients, right? Like ultimately building things for other people is the way you're going to get better because the pressure is on. You got to, do it within a reasonable timeline. And then someone else is evaluating your work. And family and friends who are getting even on your worst day, you probably make a decent piece of furniture, probably better than what's available at Walmart. They get a decent piece of furniture out of it for a good price, but they also are an audience who can look at it and possibly even tell you, what you did wrong. And sometimes they'll pay for the materials, right? So you're at least getting the material for free and then building this thing and getting experience as you go. So I did a lot of that, family and friend projects, and that kind of made me feel more comfortable about the possibility of taking on an actual client who wasn't sharing my last name. Once we got into that, I would take on clients here and there, and then it was really a matter of finding my breaking point. We were newly married. I couldn't be in the shop at all times, and then also, the long commute and being at work all day. There is a breaking point, and when I got to the point where I started to realize if I just had more time, I could take that job. I could go over there and contact that guy and respond to that client. It was just the balance was tipping. And that was the point when I decided to make this shift because the worst thing you could do is like just jump into it and you got nothing to do. You've got no work. Like you have to have clients. You have to have a purpose to build unless you're just building things, ahead of time to make for a gallery or a portfolio or something. Which I mean, some people can do that if you have the time. Build something great, take pictures of it, put it on your website. That can also help too. But that's really how it went for me. I needed to see proof that I could make some money doing that. And as long as I can make some money, then I knew I could just work harder to make more money. And that kind of built up that confidence and made me feel like I might be able to actually make it happen.
Being a woodworker, whether you're making furniture, cutting boards, or whatever, that seems like a daunting task to make a full-time income nowadays. Because it seems even scarier with lumber prices being unreliable. You don't know what that's going to do.
Mm-hmm.
It could double within the next year.
Yep.
And the value that people see in this may be there, but during times of recession or times of great inflation,
Mm-hmm.
are they going to have that disposable income to pay for that $8,000 dining table
Sure.
versus the IKEA table?
Yeah, absolutely. And you also have competition now. There was competition before, but about when I was trying to do this, it was in Temecula, California in about 2004, 2005. And my only competition were other local people building. Whereas today, if you're building an online presence and, let's say you do want to make cutting boards, well, a cutting board is something you could order from just about anywhere in the country. And if somebody has an online presence and is selling cutting boards, your neighbor doesn't necessarily need to buy one from you. They could just go to Etsy and get a fantastic cutting board, probably cheaper than you could make it for. So the competition situation is definitely different, depending on what you're building. Obviously, you're not going to be shipping everything, right? But small items certainly very competitive now.
Yeah, it's a world market.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, R.A. Charlie Guy. Appreciate it. 2 Elm Builds says, just had my son signed to the number 1 ranked junior college in the U.S. for basketball.
Whoa.
That's all right. That's
nice.
Awesome. Congratulations. Yeah. Okay, R.A. Charlie Guy. Your mini podcasts are so great to learn and get great entertainment. Using your vast library of income streams, what would you suggest to someone just starting out to look for?
Oh, that's tricky. I mean, my instinct is to always look for a gap. What's not being done? If you are like doing this YouTube thing and you're looking at what I do, you look at what Steve does, you're looking at like, the top 10% of people making woodworking content. What's someone missing? What's not being done? I don't think the way to succeed now is to aim for that million subscriber audience. I think the way to succeed now is to dig into your niche. And if you are, I don't know, you're doing marketry, right? And that's like something you're really interested in. And instead of broadening your scope, narrow the focus, because there's not a lot of people who are really honing in on that. And in terms of being, fairly successful, I actually think it's easier to hone in on a particular segment of the audience that's very passionate about that thing, rather than trying to compete, with the broader audience. And I've always looked at like my place in this. The whole situation for me is a funnel. And you got people at the very top of that funnel. Your Jimmy DiRestas, your Steve Ramseys. These guys are at the top of that funnel. They're the ones who are going to welcome in all these people who are coming to YouTube to see something be made and to be inspired, right? They're bringing them in with, well, in some cases, I mean, they make some great things, but some of the projects are very approachable or at the very least fun to watch. Then you go a couple layers deeper, and that might be where you find me. A little bit further down. If you're not really into woodworking, maybe you'll stay around for the poop jokes, but most of the time, if you're not into woodworking, you're probably going to lose interest fairly quickly. I can't hold that bigger audience. Like, I'm a little bit smaller, but I'm very happy where I am because the people who are that interested in woodworking are so fun to talk to because they are passionate about it, as passionate as I am. And those are also, from a business perspective, the people who are more likely to spend money with you because they want to learn from you or they just want to learn the craft in general, and you could provide them that service. So I think it's a matter of like looking for the gaps, look at what other audiences are not being served. What other things could you possibly dig into? And really, where are your passions? And then dig deeper into the niche. I think, again, 2022, I don't think going broad is the way to go, and going general interest is a tricky endeavor. I think really honing down, finding a very specific audience, keep those expectations on lower numbers, but higher quality interactions. And I think that's probably the way to go now.
Awesome. I'm gonna skip to another question here.
Mhm.
What's your favorite wood to work with?
I like a lot of them. I've been in the last couple of years working with a lot of cherry and walnut. You can't go wrong with either one of those. They're absolutely gorgeous woods. They work well. Sitting at a big old cherry desk right here that I work at every day. I would say those are probably two of my favorite, and they're just real nice domestic species. Yeah, I like a lot of the exotics too, but they fight you a little bit to work with exotics, just in terms of how hard you have to push them through tools and the amount of chatter you might get because they bounce a lot. But yeah, I'm going to go with the domestic species, cherry and walnut.
All right. Thanks for the question, Robert Clark. We've got a question here again from Chris at 4321 Woodworking. How do you like your new table saw? I read it can't cut a hot dog, but it can cut wood pretty good.
Yeah, I haven't tried slicing my hot dogs on it yet. It's working out great. So far, so good. And I'm part of a couple of groups, like a Facebook group on focused on saw stop. And I see people with things like accidental activations, whether it's from like a miter gauge, or one guy I just saw today was cutting a piece of MDF and it just went off for no reason. And I'm like, if I had a lot of that going on, I'd have a lot more negative to say about it. But so far, the saw has been great. I haven't had any issues. I make a habit of not touching the blade with metal or my hands. So I haven't had any activations to deal with. I got no complaints about this saw so far.
Yeah. So you could actually disengage that safety brake, right? And then cut your hot dog?
Yes, you can. You can disengage it. And if there's times you have to cut, conductive materials, or you're cutting wet wood or something. So they do give you a key that you can turn to kind of disengage it for a cut. But I think you have to re-engage it or disengage it every time you make the cut. So they really want that safety feature on. But yeah, if you really want to slice those hot dogs, you can.
Sandy from McKenzie Lumber Mill. I'm going to stop here for a second. Sandy had a friend. They were planning on going on a vacation together, and she had a friend pass away unexpectedly this week. Sandy, you, your friends, family, and all of their friends are in my prayers. And I'm glad you're with us tonight. In the grand scheme, family and friends are more important, but I'm hoping this provides a little bit of entertainment, get your mind off of things. So I'm glad you could be here.
My condolences. Sorry to hear that.
Was there a turning point where your business took off? When did you go full time and think back and okay, this is going to work?
Well, it never happened with my furniture business. So when we first started, the first couple of years, I was trying to make a living as a furniture maker. Wound up having to go back to work, not in science. I wound up going to work for some engineering firm, doing a job I didn't even know how to do, but it was money. And then I would do the woodworking on the side. Then I wanted to make another go of it, and I started working part time at a refinishing shop. So at least now the part time work I was doing would help support not just monetarily, but support my knowledge base on finishing. That was actually really, really good. That actually helped me get back on my feet. And from that point on, I even though I started to see a little bit of success, I was really having trouble nailing down clients that were willing to pay what it would cost to make the furniture I wanted to make. So it was at about that point, roughly 2006, where I discovered iTunes, which was where they were distributing not just audio content, but video podcasts as well at that time, and started to make the goofy videos that I make. It wasn't until shortly after that point, I mean, maybe a few months, when we started to get sponsor interest. And I quickly realized that was my passion. That was what was going to be a successful endeavor for me. And I think the first realization of this possibly being an ongoing, sustainable new venture for us was when we got Powermatic to agree to be a sponsor. And not just the agreement, because I don't trust anything until there's actually like a check in my hand. It was when that check came in, not to be too materialistic, but it was like, yeah, this was validation that this whole idea actually has legs and we might make this work. And I think it was at that point that I was like, well, okay, this is really happening, and I'm going to be putting all my effort into this whole video online instruction thing. So, and I would say that was probably 2007 by the time that happened, early 2007.
That's awesome. So here's we love controversy, don't we?
Oh, it's wonderful.
In your opinion, which is better, the Powermatic or the SawStop?
Well, we have to define which ones we're talking about, right? Because both SawStop and Powermatic make different grade saws. Compared to the PM2000 that I just recently sold, and comparing that to a 3 horsepower SawStop, what is it, professional? So they have the industrial is their higher grade, and then professional is the middle, and then they have the contractor. So for the SawStop Professional versus the PM2000, I think they're two different classifications of saws personally. I think the closer comparison to the PM2000 would be the SawStop Industrial. I don't have that saw. So there are things about the SawStop that I like better. They have come up with some really cool things. There are some things that I feel work a little bit better. But in terms of just being a heavy duty, like really hardcore table saw, I think the PM2000 is a more beefy table saw. But that doesn't mean that someone like me can't do great woodworking on the SawStop just because some of the parts are maybe not as thick, right? The trunnions may not be as big. The saw just cuts like butter. It works perfectly fine. But I think if we're just talking about not performance, so to be clear, not performance, I'm talking build quality. I think the PM2000 is built a little bit better. But I think if I had an industrial SawStop and I were comparing that against the PM2000, that might be a little bit more of an even fight. But I can't do that because I don't have the industrial.
Well, Mark, it sounds like you're like everyone else. We just want one of every type.
If I just had a bigger shop, it would solve everything.
We could do comparison videos. And
great. Well, people are like, hey, when are you going to review the Harvey table saw? I'm like, where am I going to put it? Like on top of the other saw? Like, what do you want me to do with a Harvey table saw? And then when I'm done with the review, what am I going to do with it? Like, there's logistics here.
Review it and sell it.
Yeah.
Okay. R.A. Charlie Guy, how do you generate traffic to your website? How did you generate traffic to your website in the early years, and what were you selling from it?
I think in the early years, the best you could do was go to a forum. So I was part of a bunch of woodworking forums at the time, and you have to be careful. I mean, even to this day, it's still the same thing. You don't want to go to a forum and spam them with like, "Everybody, check out my video." But that was kind of because it was new and no one else was making videos. It was sort of permissible until it wasn't. I mean, there was a point where I was told I need to stop. But that was one of the ways that I did get that initial traffic. Was telling people about it, and forums was that was the primary way to do it. And again, social media wasn't a thing at the time, so it wasn't like I could just kind of build my own account and tell my own individual audience about it. It was basically, you could kind of build an audience in a way in a forum, because forum regulars were kind of seen as authorities. And, oh, I'm going here just to talk to to Kenny, he knows everything about this thing, or whatever personality. You can kind of develop that in a forum, and I did a little bit of that, so that by the time I was making these videos, I could put this out there and people kind of already knew who I was. They were just learning a little bit more about me with this video stuff. The things we sold from our website, I alluded to them earlier, the veneer packs that we were getting supplied by David Marks, as well as the walnut burl blanks. So basically small individual blanks. We photograph them from all angles, and just price them for individual sale and ship them out. Neither one of those were very lucrative, but we would tell people about them, and we moved some inventory. But we also had to split the revenue with David, and it just was not a big moneymaker. But when you're trying, you're just bootstrapping everything and just trying to move forward. You try a bunch of things and just see what works. So that was pretty much it at the time.
That's awesome. Speaking of forums, can you tell us about the Wood Whisperer forum?
Yeah. So we have a forum called Wood Talk Online, and it's been around for a long time. It's gone through a bunch of different iterations. In fact, it's interesting because in the beginning, we really wanted the forum to just kind of be an extension of the Wood Whisperer. It was like a place for the community to gather. But over time, the forum just kind of developed its own personality. I even toyed with the idea of selling it just because I just didn't want the maintenance. Taking care of a forum is a big responsibility, because there's it may not be breaking records traffic wise, but the people who utilize that forum and go there every day really expect that thing to be working, and they expect it to be there. And then it's just a lot of responsibility. So thankfully we've got, a couple of good moderators who kind of do the day to day. I, for the most part, stay out unless there's software upgrades or big decisions that need to be made. Those guys are doing a great job. They're keeping it a nice, happy little community. So that's at woodtalkonline.com. Part of the reason we also tried to separate things was, I when I found a good name, I tried to use it everywhere. So we started an audio podcast in 2007 called Wood Talk Online. And then I decided around that same time to make a forum called Wood Talk Online. The thing was that these things had nothing to do with each other outside of being about woodworking. So over the years, I tried to differentiate it, and now Wood Talk Online just became the name of the forum, and the podcast is just called Wood Talk, or Wood Talk Show if we have to grab a URL or a username that's not available. That's the main forum. We've got a couple of groups on Facebook as well, which are just kind of sort of like forums where people are just a little angrier. And then we have a private forum for our members on the Guild website as well.
That's great. I really, until I started researching for this, I knew about your websites, but I really didn't know about the forum. I had watched all your videos. It's not something you bring up.
It's its own thing. I link to it. Like if you look around the Wood Whisperer site, there is a link to it.
Yeah.
But I don't push it that hard. It's doing its own thing. It maintains itself with the community, and you do a search for a woodworking question. So there's times where I've searched for things, and I'm not looking at the URLs of the results. I'm just looking at the titles, and I click on it, and I'm like, I'm in my own forum. Like the question, someone in the forum asked the same question. So it's great. It's a great resource if people want to go there. And I probably do it a bit of a disservice by not mentioning it anymore. But I think the thing is, if I don't spend my time there, I don't feel comfortable always encouraging other people to go there if I'm not there myself. But it's a thriving community. It's great if people want to check it out.
Yeah. So it was free to sign up.
Oh yeah.
I think there's an option that you can pay to have an ads-free version, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's so there are ads all over the place, but if you, it's super cheap. It's like a couple bucks for the year, and it just knocks out all the ads. If you're going to be there every day, and this is a resource or a community you want to participate in, It's a couple bucks and the ads completely disappear. But we don't hide any information. All the information is still there, but you have to endure Google ads basically.
Mark, you've been very gracious throughout this whole process, accepting my invitation, scheduling the time. I appreciate it tremendously. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to tell our audience?
Covered a lot of ground, didn't we?
We did. We were all over the place.
Yeah. I just reiterate this whole passion thing. I think we're entering into a phase, or inside of a phase, where it's easy to kind of get distracted by the numbers, get distracted by I'm going to, dare I say, glitz and glamour, because none of this is really glamorous, but you know what I mean. The influencer side of things that's going on, super easy to get distracted. And I think if you enter into this chasing those numbers and trying to emulate what these other people are doing, you're probably setting yourself up for disappointment. I think if you can't honestly answer yes to the question of, if the audience wasn't there, if the AdSense revenue wasn't there, if the quote unquote success wasn't there, would you still be doing that thing? If you can't answer yes, you may want to rethink this, because ultimately that stuff may not ever be there. And if you're not doing it because you're truly passionate about it and because you want to engage with other people on that topic, you're starting off on the wrong foot, I think. So always, think about your passion, make sure this truly is something you enjoy doing, because then you can just kind of, honestly, I think that might work in your favor, right? If you are so passionate about it that you go, well, I don't care if YouTube tells me I should only be doing a 10-minute video. I've got 15 minutes of stuff to say today, and I'm going to say it. The audience is going to identify with that. They're going to appreciate it, and you will find your audience. So be more of a leader, carve your own path, follow your passion, and don't necessarily just chase what other people are doing. It's a parting bit of advice.
I like it. Thank you again for being on here.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, folks. Next week, we'll be back to our regular time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And as for now, I hear my wife calling. I got to go.